Hi, how are you? Hi,
Hi, I'm
everybody.
good.
Good. Okay, so um my question is it's actually two questions. The first one is I'm just gonna jump right into it. But when my Kundalini awakened, and I've said it here before, there was like that crazy surge of like sexual energy, right? That I was feeling. And now it's like it's coming back and going away. And I'm not sure, do we hold that energy or do we release it? Like, I'm not sure now how to best utilize it. I'm thinking holding it, pushing it through, or do we? So that's the first one. And then the second one is there a book or two that anyone can suggest or that you can recommend that kind of goes through the phases of the awakening and, guidance around that? Like I am always trying to put myself back to how it went, but now when I think like I'm coming into contact, I believe the universe is bringing me people who have gone through it. And I guess I'm trying to remember a lot of my stages. And so I thought if there was like a guide that could sort of help me get back to reminding me about some of the, key things about the awakening. That's it.
Okay. Great question, Stasia. So sexual energy and then discussion about the stages. So first we can talk about the sexual energy. My general go-to answer is, of course, Kundalini awakening process will amplify all of the content within our system. Emotions, thoughts, feelings, as well as sexual energy, the need to sleep, maybe lack of sleep, everything gets heightened and amplified, of course, including sexual energy. So the sexual energy, if it's used for, say, procreation, sexual pleasure, we can call it sexual energy. But that same energy itself is kind of, um, in a sense, raw, and it can be used for other things as well. It can be used and channeled upwards for spiritual development. So that's why at times you may feel heightened sexual energy, and we can, in certain situations, feel it trying to say move upwards, flowing upwards. We can feel inclined to almost spontaneously engage in some practices to draw it upwards ourselves with visualizations, maybe certain breath techniques, certain
Like the
uh
locks, like those locks that we do.
yeah, the body locks. So like the Kegels in a typical Western word, Kegels, but in yoga, Mula Bandha, which is it's flexing the pelvic floor,
Right.
drawing the core inwards and upwards. All of this helps the prana to move up the spinal column towards the higher energy centers where it can do work. Now, um, there's no right or wrong way to relate with the energy, especially when you're working with it in its sexual form. So there's no like you can't get it wrong per se. The idea here is to just approach it all with consciousness and to experiment and see what works for you. So there's no guilt, no shame, no right or wrong. So you may have to explore a little bit what happens when you draw it upwards in meditation. What happens when you have a creative outlet to express that creative energy. Sexual energy is creative. It can actually inspire you to do art, to do to be an innovator, to get great confidence. It can actually also feel great vitality and radiance if it's channeled upwards. But that
Yeah,
doesn't
I've
mean
been
that
doing a
we,
lot of art. I feel like that's where I've kind of been drawn to. But I guess that actually helps it ascend when you, okay.
yeah, so it can move upwards
Yeah.
towards these higher energy centers, creativity, move upwards towards God, towards deep meditative states. It can fuel all of that. But of course, it can also be released outwards and downwards for, say, of course, procreation, sexual enjoyment, also to just find relief. Sometimes the energy is just so strong and powerful, it may arise as a heightened libido. And we may say, I don't have the strength or the willingness or the energy or the interest to channel it upwards to meditate deeply or to become an artist. I don't want to do any of that. I just want release. So you can have a release. And then my invitation is not to feel guilty or shameful about any of that. It's really not, we're not, this isn't the Catholic Church or something saying that,
No, I
right?
know.
But
That's why
what
I'm
I
asking
said,
it here.
yeah, so what I suggest is contemplate, journal, meditate on how you feel with the energy, how
Mhm.
you feel during any expression, whether it's creative expression or some sort of outward release, how that feels. And then afterwards, take a note, how do I feel now? Do I feel relieved? Do I feel inspired? Do I feel tired? And then so we take note of all three of those sections of the process. And that helps us to develop consciousness around, how we can best relate with this energy. We collect more data and we develop our own unique relationship with it. And of course, this changes with the seasons, right? For most people, they may be more heightened sexual energy, heightened libido, say during the spring and summer months. During winter, maybe it's a little bit less intense. As we get older, of course, depending on the situations in our relationships, all of these things matter. And so it's different for everybody. There's no black and white thing. So what I say is just bring consciousness to the relationship and explore that way. Um, so the next point was about the stages. So the stages of the awakening process. Once again, it's unique to each individual. So there's many ways of looking at this,
Mhm.
but everyone has a different sort of unfolding. So it's not like we can look at anybody, even here amongst us, and say, "Oh, we're in the same stage." Because if we look at people's pasts, very different stuff happened, very different timeline, and they also have very different missions for the
Mhm.
future. So the things just look very different. So I'll see if I can ramble a bit more around this point, but overall, regardless of where we're at on the path, regardless of what stage we're at, the work is essentially the same,
Mhm.
essentially the same. And if you're supporting other people who happen to be, drawn to you, seeking some answers, some guidance, you can share with them too. The work is essentially the same. Whether you're at the beginning, the middle, or the end, self-care, very important. Some
Mhm.
sort of safe container where we go and relate with our emotions, thoughts, and feelings as they come up. Very important. Call it meditation, call it journaling, whatever you feel is right. Doing our best to sleep well, to eat well, to move the body, exploring, studying, doing some sort of learning just to keep ourselves uh, motivated towards further growth and to help us not get stuck or stagnant or complacent or arrogant in thinking that, we're at the final stage when perhaps we're not. So studying will keep us more open to learning more and more. Um, that helps, but I can also share the recent book I read that I think might be helpful, Mary Schuton's Working with Kundalini.
Okay.
Working with Kundalini. That's her book. She's really clear, very sharp. It's a modern book, so it's written in easily accessible language. She has another book. It's called The Spiritual Awakening Guide, which is a bit more general, but also speaks to this idea of different stages of the awakening process. So that can help you and give you a bit of an idea of where we're at. But remember that these maps are useful, but they don't translate perfectly over to every individual. So we have to use our wisdom when we're understanding where we're at or when we're supporting one another. Um, that's a little bit about what I can say about the stages.
Yeah. No, that was kind
Everybody
of,
has this question. Go ahead.
yeah. Yeah, that was kind of what I was thinking. Like, I know that everyone has a totally different experience and some of them are like similar too. So, but it was more just for like a good place to go and find information so I could, because when I was going through it, I just thought I had mental health problems. I
Right.
was losing my shit, pardon my language, but like right? So that's why I'm like, I wanted to go back and sort of be able to look at something. But okay, I'll take a look at that. I appreciate your help. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I think you'll find some good stuff in Mary Chuton's work. And yeah, these are very reasonable questions, very reasonable questions. I'm sure we all have them in some way or another. So thank you so much for those.